Your discussion. Yeah, what did you think about taking things for granted, and what lies behind that? And what would your life be like if you didn't? Was it a helpful discussion?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
First of all, we discovered there was lots of things to take for granted. People, you can take yourself for granted, things around you. There's many things to take for granted.
Yeah.
And I think eventually we came to the conclusion that prioritizing and deciding what is prioritizing the items, deciding what is the most important thing might help too.
Yeah. Okay, so spending time thinking about what is the most important thing in our lives and setting those as priorities might help us to appreciate those things more and not take them for granted. Yeah. And then what criteria do you use to decide what's important in your life? What criteria do you use? Yeah? Yeah, okay. One criteria is the benefit for other sentient beings. Yeah. And when we were kids, what were we taught was the criteria? What does our society take as the criteria? Money, what I want, yeah, good looks, high status, lots of possessions, yeah, fitting in with what everybody else is doing. But do those criteria really work in your life? Yeah. They bring pain and misery? Really? But lots of people, when they get money, they're happy. No? How does that not bring happiness?
My brother, when he finally was poor, kind of, and then he got a lot of money, he realized pretty quickly that once you have a certain amount, it doesn't do anything.
He just needs more.
It might just keep some of the miseries away that you would have if you didn't have money, but other than that, it didn't contribute to happiness.
Or the lottery winner as well.
Yeah.
Right, and how many problems the people who win the lotteries have afterwards in their lives. Yeah. But I think it's very important in our life to have quite clear in our mind what are the criteria that we use for deciding what's important and what's not. Because if we haven't thought about this well and we don't know what criteria, then we just kind of follow whatever is going on in our mind, and it's kind of murky. We're making decisions about what's important and what's not, but we're not really clear why we're deciding one thing's important and something isn't.
Deciding based on what will be important at the time of death.
Okay, so that's another criteria. What will be important at the time of death? Why is that a good criteria to use?
Because death is what's going to come. Death is the big event. It's the period at the end of the sentence.
Okay. but what's important then, why is using that as a
Future state of mind.
Because of karma.
because of karma, because of future lives? But you're just going to die and there's no future life, right?
But it's going to be scary. And I want to be ready first. I mean, if I know if I'm going to have to experience something that's painful, then I want to be as ready for that as possible. I don't want to spend my whole life deluding myself and then come to that moment and just have to have it all without being ready. That's quite frightening.
Yeah.
it's going to come, I should at least try to make it easier. I know it's coming.
Mm-hmm. It's true, isn't it? I mean, death is one thing we know is coming. Yeah, it's the only thing we have to do. Yeah. And so if we can prepare for it, then they say it can be like going on a picnic. Yeah. But for the great masters, that dying is like going on a picnic. It's, you know, they have a good time, nothing fearful, no regrets. But to have that kind of death, we have to really practice in our life. Mm-hmm.
I received a great benefit when I met the Dharma, because I think it gave me a purpose in life. And once that purpose was clear, then establishing the priorities was clear. Mm-hmm. Because then everything that furthered the purpose was my priority, and everything that took me away from the purpose, and it was something I had to abandon.
Yeah.
So it brought a lot more clarity, having that goal of knowing what I wanted to do.
Mm. And so what is your goal?
I want to be the best person I possibly can, so that I can be of the highest benefit to all. And so that is my purpose, and it may take me more than one life, it may take me beyond, but every step that I take gets me closer, I hope. And so everything that helps me further along that path is a priority, and then everything that does not, then is something I need to abandon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, makes sense, huh? What do you think? Yeah. So I think that's very true. When we have a very, very clear purpose in our life, you know, even if it's something that's quite, you know, becoming the best person you can to benefit others. I mean, when you think of best person I can, well, that means becoming a Buddha, you know. I mean, it's going to take a long time, but when you know that, then you're going in that direction, and then you have your priorities, you have your purpose, you can make decisions based on that, and then to shed the things that aren't conducive for the direction you want to go in. It doesn't become so painful when you're really convinced that's the direction you want to go in. Yeah. When you're not so convinced, yeah, then, oh well. Yeah. And so I think part of our practice is really establishing that purpose, you know, and that meaning. And then, you know, asking ourselves, okay, what is conducive for that and what is antithetical? Hmm? So I think this kind of reflection is very, very important to do. When we're brought up and in our school system, they don't teach us this. And yet I think this is probably the most important thing to think about in our lives, because when we don't have a clear purpose, then our actions become very, very confused. Wouldn't you say, in looking at your own life? Yeah. If you don't have a clear purpose, or if you have a very self-centered purpose, then our actions become pretty confusing, don't they? Yeah. So this takes some reflection. It's very good that we put the time on the cushion and really reflect about that. Yeah? Because then we wind up being able to live our life very well, and then at the time of death we don't have any regrets, because we've been able to live well and make wise decisions. And even if we make unwise decisions, and we make really stupid things, which we've all done, right? If we can look at those things and learn from them, Yeah? So that we can look at the stupid things and regret them, but really learn and really understand, how did I get myself in that position? What was going on in my mind that I did that? And really understand how the mind works. If we can investigate that deeply, then we can learn from those experiences. And in that way, we can look back on them and say, I'm glad they happened, even though they were painful, even though I may have done harmful things. Yeah, but I learned something important that I wish I didn't have to learn through that way. But now I want to remember what I learned so that I don't harm others and harm myself in the future. Yeah. And I think if we learn to deal with things in our past in that way, then we don't carry a lot of baggage with us in our life. Yeah? We're baggageless. And as you know, they charge for every piece of luggage nowadays. So it's better to travel light. Okay. It was interesting, the conversation I just had with my niece. She was saying that it seems as you get old, that your life just becomes worse because, you know, you've made more mistakes, and you have more problems in relationships, and you have more losses, and there's more things that happen that are distressing to you, just kind of the cumulative effect, and you have more friends that die, and you're getting older, and you're getting uglier, and you're fat, and your health is getting worse. You know? What? It sounds terrible, but it's true, isn't it? You know, all this is happening, isn't it? You know, she's not lying. All this is happening. And,
I mean, I'm happier being me now than I was having any time in my life.
Okay, so you're happier being you now than you were earlier. Why? What changed?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I mean, I wasted a lot of time on my youth being a crabby, mean person, you know. So, and you know, and wanting things that weren't ever going to happen and all that stuff, you know. And, I mean, I still do. I'm not saying I've given all that up, but my mind's a lot more stable, you know. Whatever happens a lot more. I don't have all this drama and drama over things that I can't control as much, you know. I think, you know, I mean, I may just have come from a really bad place and have sort of, you know, the line has come down or whatever, but no, but it's true for some people. It is true that they become, you know, I think Beth said it the best. She still lives around a lot and works with older people, 90s, 80s, like that. She says you become distilled at that age. And you either become distilled into kind of something that's sour and, you know, become really pure and beautiful.
Yeah. How many of you feel that your life has gotten better as you've gotten older? Interesting. All the old people. All the old people, right. Yeah, all the people in their 20s and 30s were kind of like this, you know.
The old person and I didn't agree. One of us holding out back here.
Yeah.
I think one of the really great things about getting older is that you can look back on your life, like on decades, and you can get a perspective that you just don't, I didn't have anyway when I was 20. I didn't have enough distance. It's sort of like looking at art. If you're up too close to a lot of things, you can't really see the picture. But if you stand back, then you can. There's a sense of it.
Yeah.
I think that my life has been like that. Now that I can look back, I can see things I couldn't see when they were happening.
It also brings an urgency. It's like that thing about wanting to live a long time so you can practice the Dharma longer. It's like trying to keep the body, in spite of all my falls and spills and trying to keep the body going so that I came to the Dharma too late in life, It's like that feeling of urgency. I've really got to read everything. I've really got to study everything, And it's like everything else gets left behind. Everything else is just fluff. I don't need it.
But if I hadn't met the Dharma, I think the answer to that question would have been very different. Because before I met the Dharma, the patterns, the habituations, the negative states of mind were becoming more embedded, more rutted. My perspective was actually getting narrower and more panicky and more disillusioned. So if I hadn't met the Dharma, I think my answer to that question would have been different.
I would just concur with that. I'm 36, and I raise my hand that as I've gotten older, it's gotten better, but only because of the Dharma. So much suffering in my 20s. So really, I would agree, only because of the Dharma that things gotten better. Otherwise, I think I'd just be cycling around and suffering.
Well, I think a lot of it is following the path that's right for you. When we're younger, we're brought up in a certain path that may not fit for us at all. So you try to fit into a box that doesn't work for you. That never leads to happiness. And as you grow, you figure out who you are and what fits. And to me, that's made a huge difference.
I kind of think it has to do with people who learn from their mistakes, partly, and also your ethics. And because if you aren't living ethically, then everything just gets more and more of a mess. I think that it is quite a problem. What you were describing in the beginning, although we were laughing, I actually think it's why my nephew committed suicide when he was 18. He looked forward. He couldn't see any purpose or meaning. But I've also met people like my uncle who just died, and he had a sense of ethics. He carried it with him through his life, and he actually, like you were saying, more got on the distilled side in a positive way, even more and more. And he had ethics that fit him.
I think there are many characteristics. I think that's one of them, and I think open-mindedness also. As I've got older, I've got more open-minded, more receptive to things. Less, the Old Testament they call the people stiff-necked. They don't want to bend, they don't want to, So I used to be very stiff-necked.
There's one that disagrees. Mainly it's because of my experience the last 2 years. I've been dealing with aging parents, and one parent died last summer, and the other is 89 and becoming older, and all the pain and suffering that goes with it. And I'm becoming extremely aware of sickness, old age, death. And I was with my father when he died, and he drowned to death in his own fluid. And he was terrified, absolutely terrified. And I look at my mother, who is getting closer all the time, and she has always been a I'll do it myself person and has done very well doing it for herself. she is suffering from the inability to do it for herself anymore without anything else to replace it with. It's just suffering. And both my parents came from the age where you didn't talk about anything. You didn't talk about your fears. You didn't talk. So they die with them. And the thought of where that's going to take them is terrifying. And so I think I agree with most of you in the sense that I think that those of us that are in the 60s, you know, we've dealt with a lot of stuff and we feel better about ourselves mentally, spiritually, and psychologically. But we haven't faced the end yet either. And when I look at what my dad went through dying, and what my mother's going through, and then I start subtracting the difference in ages, and it's right around the corner. And granted, I'm very thankful for the Dharma, because it's been the only thing that I have encountered that has made sense to me, but I am running out of time. And yet the laziness that we talked about is there, and it's like a demon. You know, and after in our discussion group, I'm going to make my sign here that says, how many lazy bodhisattvas are there? I mean, I know I'm plagued with laziness. It's a sickness that I can't instantaneously cure. And I'm so afraid. I look at this life and I think, you know, granted, I had to have done some positive things to come across the Dharma and the things that have happened to me in that perspective. But I've done a lot of other things in previous lives that have kept me from being able to apply maybe some stuff that I came with on the Dharma side. And where am I going to go afterward, you know? It's frightening, really, when you think about it. I mean, but I didn't think about it until I had to deal with and decide to be with my parents. Because I suffer too when I see them suffer, and I suffer when I'm angry at my mom because she's such a pain in the butt, you know. So, like I said, I'm just see it as a different and a little bit different perspective.
Yeah. So you're really, the old age, sickness, and death is right in front of you, and you're seeing what that's entailed, and you've seen in the example of your parents, aging and sickness and death, the most scary thing, and you're appreciative for the Dharma that you've learned, but also this kind of laziness and obscuration that keeps you from really using the potential that you have. Yeah. At the same time, how fortunate you are to have met the Dharma when you did. Because I often think of what would my life have been like if I hadn't met the Dharma. Then I really see what kind of suffering things would have turned out as. Yeah. So there's a great appreciation for having met the Dharma. And then also the sense of urgency that you spoke of, you know, how we all feel like we're not going to die. Or if we're going to die, it's, long time away, long time away. Whereas you're having the experience of it really, no, it's not that long, and that's kind of scary and it shakes you up. If we use that feeling of being shaken up in a skillful way, it can help us overcome the laziness, and it can actually make us live more vitally. Okay? Because when the aging, sickness, and death is in front of us, and we see, okay, without the Dharma, this is how I react to it. With the Dharma, this is how I work with it. And we're just talking this life. Then definitely you get some energy to practice the Dharma. And then if you look beyond this life, if I die as somebody who was terrified, where am I going to wind up? if I'm able to practice now, and as much, maybe I haven't completely calmed my mind by the time I die, but maybe there's a little bit more calmness, and even if there's not, at least I've planted some virtuous seeds. If at the time of death maybe some negative thought arises, still I've spent a good chunk of time in my life creating virtue. I can rejoice at that. Okay? And so you know that as much as you can put your mind into the Dharma, that much more it's going to alleviate that fear and panic at the time of death and the possibility of a lower rebirth, because you've really used the time that you have now. So we can always look at our lives and, if I could have, would have, should have, ought to have done this, and all of our shortcomings and what lousy practitioners we are, we're very good at seeing all of our faults. Or I think it might also be good to look and say, but I have done this, and I have done this, and I have done this, and rejoice at our own merit, and encourage ourselves. Because one thing I've learned is that if we say woulda, coulda, shoulda, or even for regrets for the past, but even for the present, if I really understood impermanence, I would practice a lot more. Yeah? We say this. If I really understood, so I should practice, I should practice the Dharma more because I'm going to die, and so I should give up these attachments because they don't lead anywhere to suffering. I really should give them up. But as much as we should on ourselves, it doesn't work. Why? Because should is all up here. And I think this is where the maturity comes when we have done a lot of meditation, is that instead of saying should, we have some deep understanding in our heart. And when there's the deep understanding in our heart, then we naturally want to go in a certain direction. And we don't have to say, I should not be so lazy, I should do this. When we've really spent the time thinking about impermanence and death, thinking about Buddha nature, thinking about what samsara is, thinking about what the path is to get out, when we've really thought deeply about those subjects, then that acts as the causal basis for the energy to naturally go in those directions. Whereas should doesn't work very well. Okay? So to get beyond should, we need to put time on the cushion and really think about things.
And I was in our group, became really aware of also I have an either-or mind. And there's really no compromise, nothing in between. My mind says you either have to be this way or that way. So, watch that.
Right. And to really learn to rejoice at our own and others' virtues. Very important.
I would like some advice about something that happens to me, and I haven't yet found a way to manage it. And that is, I'm a householder, and I also feel like there's an urgency to studying and really deepening my understanding of the Dharma. And so what happens is I concentrate on that, for example, for a period of time. Then the house goes to pieces, the dirt accumulates, the overflows. I'm not spending as much time with my family or my daughter. And so then I go, I totally need to correct that, make course correction. And so then I got all this work to do now in the house because everything is upside down. And I haven't talked to my family in ages, and my daughter, I need to go and spend time with her and take her places, so then I do all that. And so now I'm on the other direction and not doing stuff. So I kind of spent a lot of time doing that. How can I have a more balanced...
I see a lot of heads nodding. Yeah. Okay. So the challenge the householder, actually the challenge, it's actually the challenge of living with a body, you know, that we have to take care of our environment. I mean, you even hear that at the Abbey too. Oh, we work so much, you know, we're working too much, doing this, doing that, we don't have enough time for Dharma. Then we have retreat, you know, 3 months silent retreat. Oh, I'm on the cushion so much, you know, nothing's getting done. Yeah, I'm out of shape, nothing around here is getting done. Yeah, so, you know, this is just our mind, isn't it? Yeah, whenever we're doing one thing, we think we should be doing another thing. Or we just completely go, you know, too much this way and then too much that way. Yeah, too much just only Dharma and then too much only samsara. And I think, you know, we need to start not having this black and white mind about Dharma and samsara and learn how to see the things in our daily life from a Dharma perspective, so that the things we do in our daily life enrich our Dharma understanding. So instead of seeing them as hindrances, you know, and as a pain in the neck, you use them to increase your Dharma understanding. And then when you're, you know, doing more formal Dharma, and the cushion and whatever, to also remember to extend that out into the practical world you live in and your daily life activities. Yeah. So practicing Dharma doesn't mean that the dirty dishes have to stack up and the garbage stacks up and the phone messages stack up and the emails stack up and, you know, and your daily life falls apart. No, but rather, you know, you do your meditation and then, okay, you know, when I'm washing the dishes, I'm cleaning the minds of sentient beings with the realization of emptiness. Okay? When I'm going to work, I'm offering service to sentient beings. When things happen, conflict situations, I'm learning about myself. I'm learning about how the mind works. I'm learning that not everybody's like me. I'm learning how to be skillful in dealing with other people. And, you know, and all those kind of skills and things that you learn, you take into your Dharma practice, and then you use your Dharma practice also to generate a more loving, compassionate heart, which will help you be more skillful. So you find a way to stop seeing these things as so different, so black and white. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's kind of in relationship to what Elise was saying. I was one of the nodding heads. What I realized, especially as you were talking, is that what comes up for me is resentment, and so then what I realize is just I want things my way, because I want to, like if I want to be studying a text, I want to do it as much as I want, for as long as I want to, and I don't want to have to worry about getting up in the morning and going to work and being tired and stuff. So it seems like it's a lot of, I just want to do things how I want to do them. That's what also comes up, trying to get everything done.
Right. Okay. So as you're saying, one of the things that makes the integration difficult is that, you know, you would like to be able to read a Dharma text and stay up as late as you want reading and thinking about it and not have to go to work in the morning, but you have to go to work in the morning. Okay? So then what you think, and you're seeing that it's, you know, one way to look at it is, well, this is my natural way, the way I get more things done, and the way I want to use my energy. And if you think like that, then you're going to be miserable because everything's going to seem as a hindrance. Yeah, my natural way is just to go with the flow and stay up as late as I want, and having to go to work is a nuisance and a hindrance, and, you know, I should just be able to make up my own schedule because then my energy is going in the direction I want it to go in and it's not getting interrupted. You hear this around the Abbey too. Okay? I don't like the schedule. Okay? So,
do we have a vote of agreement?
You know, And we get letters, somebody wrote us, you know, the schedule just really interfered with my spontaneity. Yeah, because I was just really into doing something or having a good conversation or reading a Dharma text, and then the bell rings and I have to go do something else, you know? So, you know, it's the same thing whether you're in a monastery or outside, isn't it? Okay.
I said that early on. I used to meditate in the morning, and I just set the timer on the stove because I knew I had to go to work.
Yeah.
You know, and then I was free. I didn't have to think about the time forever until I heard the bell flipping.
Yeah. Yeah. So you can either see these things as, you know, a hindrance to the natural flow and the way I want to do it, or you could see it as this is showing me how to change gears. It's showing me how to be happy even when I'm not doing things the way I want to do them. Yeah? It's giving me the opportunity to cultivate a happy mind, even though this isn't my choice of how I would do things. Because if you look at it, if we're going to train to be bodhisattvas, yeah, are bodhisattvas going through life saying, I want to have my way, and I want the schedule to be the way I like it, and what's good for my energy? You know, when you're a bodhisattva, you have to navigate things and know, you know, when to take an opportunity, when to lay back. You know, you have to have this sensitivity about so many things, which means often giving up what you want to do when you want to do it. So if you see this as training in being a bodhisattva, how can I cultivate a happy mind doing this activity? Then that becomes part of your practice. Otherwise, you just create resentment, don't you?
I do.
Yeah. Yeah.
I kind of just imagine the holiness for yourself or Mother Teresa just saying, no, not today, I just need some me time.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yet I want to be a bodhisattva, but I think I need some me time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, can you imagine His Holiness saying that? You know, getting somewhere and saying, you know, I'm really not in the mood to teach today. I'm in the middle of reading this text and I just want to do it, and having to go give this talk is just interfering with the natural flow of my Dharma energy. Yeah. I mean, could you imagine His Holiness saying that?
I just need some downtime.
Yeah, I need some downtime. The schedule's too full. Mm-hmm. You know, you're making me work too hard. You're expecting too much of me. You aren't grateful. You just want more and more and more and more. And you never say thank you for how hard I work. You know, can you imagine His Holiness, you know, opening a Dharma talk that way? You know, and then closing it with, look what I've sacrificed to you for you. You know, I'm so unhappy here, I'm so miserable here, but I'm doing this just for you. Yeah. See, I mean, you really see the difference between a bodhisattva and a non-bodhisattva, don't you? You know? So it gives us some idea of how we need to train our mind. So when these things happen, to say, this is my bodhisattva training. You know, this is my bodhisattva training. When we do something with a good motivation and somebody says, you know, blah, 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 and trashes us, and criticizes us even though we were trying to help, to be able to say, this is my bodhisattva training. If I think this is bad, when I'm an actual bodhisattva, it's going to happen much more often. Yeah, you think people don't criticize His Holiness? Oh, lots of people criticize. Well, you start with the Beijing government, but even amongst in the Tibetan community, everybody goes yes, yes, and then they do what they want. And, he faces all sorts of challenges and criticism. Some people think that he travels too much. Some people think that he isn't strong enough with China. Some people think he copped out because he's teaching nonviolence and he wants autonomy instead of independence. Some people don't like that he isn't the head of the government, that Sangdang Rinpoche is. I mean, he receives lots of criticism. He told people to abandon one practice. Oh, people didn't follow at all and criticized him. Yeah? So, if we get criticized, we should really think, when I'm a bodhisattva, this is only going to intensify. So this is my bodhisattva training, to deal with this little bit of criticism, little bit of inconvenience. And then the more you learn to deal with it, then the less problematic it becomes. Yeah? But if we don't learn to deal with it, then because these situations will keep happening, we become more and more miserable. So this is kind of relating to our discussion about how we get distilled as we grow older. If we learn to deal with things, the distilling becomes, very sweet. And if we're continuously resentful, then, no, but distill means to get the essence. Yeah? So then it becomes quite, we become quite bitter. Okay.
Do you have some advice for people in my situation? My parents are getting older, they're in their early 80s, and my father's very bitter, and all his life he's been quite mentally cruel to my mother. And so when I see them, they live in England, but I see them 2 or 3 times a year. So it's a very difficult thing for me to face, because I try and help just by being useful, doing their cooking, cleaning, taking them somewhere or whatever. It's difficult to actually give your parents advice.
Okay, so when your parents are stuck in some unhealthy habits that actually make them miserable, yeah, and how difficult it is to be around them and see that happening, and yet it's very difficult to change them, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. So, anybody else know that situation? Yeah.
I have one thing to say about what you were just talking about. And the best thing anyone can do is come up with an excuse to get your parents to go somewhere where His Holiness is, a venerable children is. Speaking from personal experience, meeting you was the most wonderful thing that has happened to my mother. Because all these years she thought I belonged to some weird cult. You never heard anybody say that, right?
Just my parents.
Years later, and she got to see, she didn't actually get to see His Holiness, but she got to see the reflected happiness of the people that were there, and she listened to stories about Him. And just, 2 weeks ago, she told me that the best gift I ever gave her was the daily calendar that had things from His Holiness on it, and she and her sister read it every single day. So I'm telling you, get them. But it's I had exactly, the guy had exactly the same experience. My father was a very angry person, very happy person, and I thought, he was very cruel to my mother, and it wasn't until after he died that I saw my mother's participation in the relationship.
I think you know these kinds of things, because our parents' relationship is quite evident to us. We've lived with them for a long time. You can use it to really see what works and what doesn't work in life. And a lot of times, some of the biggest lessons we can learn is what doesn't work. Yeah? Excuse me just a minute. And so, if you watch this and see how painful it is for them, and you also think about the karma that they create and where that karma is going to take them in the future life, then you really can begin to have some compassion for the suffering and for how difficult it is for them to change and to realize things about themselves when they've been set in certain patterns for a long time. And so then we say, well, that applies to me too. So what patterns am I set in that don't work in my life that I want to try and change because I don't want to grow older and become like that? Okay? So I think lots of times we can really look at it and say, you know, what was that person doing so that I know what I need to avoid? And then also think about how am I going to avoid it? Because very often we may have the same way of thinking, the same kind of emotional pattern that we see in them that doesn't work, but we do the exact same thing. Okay? And so sometimes seeing it clearly in another person, then you go, oh, I have it too. You know, I know how the other person should change. Let's apply that to myself.
For me, that's why the Dharma has been so helpful, because on my own I couldn't change those patterns. It was only after learning about all of the methods, the thought training methods, the mind training methods in Buddhism, that I actually started making headway and could change.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't want to say it's not our job to change our parents, but really,
it's not.
It's an individual's job to change themselves.
Exactly.
If the parents wanted to change, then you're there to assist them. And perhaps at some point you could help them with their death, whether they're Buddhist or Catholic or whatever, but you can't really try and make them into different people, or Buddhists or anything else.
Right, you can't. You can't.
Just support them as they act.
Right. Yeah, completely. Really accepting them as they are, encouraging their good qualities, supporting them when they're open to it, and accepting what we can't change.
Just on that note, I'm thinking I need some kind of class or book that can translate like Buddhist and psychological terms into like normal, so I can sneakily get it in there, you know, like talk to them, but not so they don't think that I'm throwing that stuff out, you know what I mean? Because they hear, oh, well, you know, in psychology, you know, there's this therapy, whatever, and or they hear, oh, in Buddhism, you know, and they're like, no, or they're like, what's that mean? I'm like, well, it's a Buddhist term, whatever. They don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot of good stuff that can be, like you were saying, talking to your niece. How do you say it to somebody who's not Buddhist in non-Buddhist terms?
Right.
And boil it down to the essence of all that is good and can make you happy.
Yeah. So how do you take that essence and say it in terms and with examples that are acceptable to the people that you're talking to, according to their mentality, their culture, and so on. And so I think this is, you know, if you think of what bodhisattvas are, one of the qualities they develop is this kind of sensitivity to know how to do that. You know, who do you speak to with technical terms? Who do you say this to? Who do you say that to? Who do you speak who do you joke with? Who do you speak serious with? You know, you develop that sensitivity. So I think a lot of that comes through our own practice. You know, I know for myself that the more I've had to take the teachings and apply them to my own mind and use them to understand myself and resolve my own difficulties, that the more I've done that, the more the vocabulary comes to be able to share it in an Dharma way. Yeah. But that really just comes from applying it ourselves.
When they don't give up on it to me. Like hormone children, but I have a born-again Buddhist son who understands the suffering of change. And if he thought it was a Buddhist thing, he wouldn't have listened to me. But it's taken a lot of work and waiting for the right opportunity and knowing him and what words to put it in. But to me that tickles my tummy every time I think about it, because when I first went to see Venerable with the retreat in Montana, and he said, "Oh, Mom, you gotta be careful." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Those Buddhists have some really weird ideas." Don't give up.
Okay. So I think a lot of the things come down to putting into practice ourselves what we learn. Yeah? And as we do that, we develop deeper understanding, and also by discussing with other people like we're discussing now, I think we can learn a lot as well. You know, what works, what doesn't work. Because very often we feel like, oh, I'm the only one who's faced this certain kind of difficulty. But when we talk, we see that we're all basically struggling with very similar things.
In this discussion, especially, it seemed like there was quite a lot of uniformity of how everything was expressed. I mean, I learned a lot, especially around the laziness side of everything. But really, a lot of our experiences were really very similar.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was going to say, you know, I think often a lot of us come to you and ask for advice, either specifically or in the context of the group, and it's incredibly valuable. And I think we're also a resource as Dharma friends to one another. That's really, really important to know, to be available with our Dharma wisdom, or to be able to ask for Dharma friends when we don't have access to a teacher. Because I think it's really, really valuable. We're talking in the group, you get a lot of support and strength and encouragement, and it's really the support in that sense.
Yeah, I think that's very, very important, because our Dharma friends who understand a part of us that not everybody in our life understands, and they're living according to the same principles, or trying to live according to them, and so we can really help and support each other very much. Yeah. So you don't have to think of help as, you know, I'm coming here with this thing that you just take it and you use it and it's going to help you and solve your problems. You know, that lots of times just having a discussion with a Dharma friend, we are supporting that person in their practice. You know, we are helping them. Or having a discussion with a friend who doesn't practice Dharma, but casting, you know, throwing in Buddhist perspectives while you're talking with them. Yeah, in a supportive way, but you're not sitting there as, you know, you're not pontificating. Because pontificating doesn't always work very well. Yeah.
And I think what's, to me, so important is we have shared experiences with those people, whether they're Buddhist or not, so we can relate to them. We can relate to each other.
We know what they're feeling. Yep. Yep. Okay, let's sit quietly for a few minutes, and then we'll dedicate. And tomorrow morning, We will talk about the Heart Sutra.
We didn't get to the fourth, the last of the four.
Well, we kind of did the last of the four, in the sense that when you have eliminated, when you have realized emptiness and selflessness, then that enables you to eliminate the ignorance. That elimination of ignorance is nirvana, and nirvana is peace, because when you've eliminated the ignorance, then the attachment, anger, and other afflictions don't have any basis to stand on, then the karma doesn't create it that perpetuates rebirth. Okay? And so nirvana is peace in the sense that we're freed from that compulsive rebirth after rebirth after rebirth. So this is actually another quite interesting topic to discuss, is what is freedom? You know, because we have one idea of freedom in our lives, but the Buddha had a very different idea of what freedom is. Mm-hmm.
One more question, because it relates to what you were saying. In some places, when I read the text, it appears that in some places emptiness and selflessness are used interchangeably.
Mm-hmm.
Do they mean the same, or do they have a slightly
Yeah. Well, like I was saying, that in this common interpretation to all the different tenet systems, emptiness refers to the lack of a permanent, partless, independent person, and selfless to the absence of a self-sufficient, substantially existent person. But when you talk about, from the viewpoint of Prasangika, emptiness and selflessness both refer to the lack of an inherently existent person and lack of inherently existent phenomena.